Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We start the chapter on reproduction in humans. This is 5090 O-level biology, and this is the first video on this chapter. And we'll see how many videos we have to cover in this. Now, the first topic under this chapter in the syllabus is identify on diagrams of the male reproductive system and state the functions of the testes, scrotum, sperm ducts, prostate gland, urethra, and penis. So first of all, we need to identify. So you should be looking at front diagrams and side diagrams as well to be understanding this. The first thing is the testes. So the testes are two organs which are going to be producing the sperms and also produce the hormone testosterone. And then there is a tube which is going to carry these sperms, and that tube is called the vas deferens. Now you don't have to know this name vas deferens. You can also know the name sperm duct. So it's not technically its a name, but in your syllabus it just says sperm ducts. So there's sperm ducts. There's one on either side, this side and this side, and then the sperm ducts opens into the urethra. So this is what we need to understand is, and then where it enters and meets the urethra, it is going to have a gland here, which is called the prostate gland, which is surrounding it. So the prostate gland surrounding the urethra where the sperm ducts open. I'm just going to show you another diagram of this, and this is of course the side view of it, and we only have to know the skin which covers it outside. This is called the scrotum, and this actually is a protection, protects it because the testes are outside the abdominal cavity. So testes, scrotum, sperm ducts, prostate gland, and the urethra. And this is where the urethra has been labeled, and you can see this diagram. You can maybe pause the video and have a look at it here. I'm showing you first the bladder, which is up there, and then the ureters which are coming and opening into the bladder, and then as you can see here, the urethra, the prostate gland, the sperm ducts, and the scrotum, which is the skin outside, and this of course is the testes. Front view showing you all these, the ureters coming from the top, opening into the bladder, the vas deferens or the sperm duct, and the testes, the urethra, prostate gland. So just a quick diagram, just a quick visualization of the different ways that they can give it to you in the exam, and they can ask you to label this in a number of, sort of just asking you to see if you can identify the different parts. Different functions. The testes produce sperms and sex hormones. So the sex hormones will be carried in the testicular blood vessel. So there'll be a testicular artery and there'll be a testicular vein. And these hormones will be carried in the blood and work in different parts of the body at target organs. Then the vas deferens or the sperm duct is going to conduct and also store sperms. Then the prostate gland contributes a basic an alkaline fluid, which then together with the sperms is called the semen. The urethra is going to conduct the sperms. So these are the different functions of the different parts of the male reproductive system. And the female reproductive system is made up of, and again, ovaries, one on either side. So two ovaries, one on either side, this one and this one here. And then we have the fallopian tube. And the other name for this is the oviduct. So this is another name is the oviduct, which in your syllabus is also being mentioned as the ovaries, oviduct, uterus, cervix, and vagina. Then vagina is the part through which the menstrual cycle blood is going to pass out, and when the baby is born, passes out through the vagina. Then we have a hollow organ which is called the uterus, or it is called the uterine cavity. The uterus is a hollow organ made up of a wall, and there is a muscle in the wall of the uterus, which is called the myometrium. Of course, you don't have to know the name of it. And then there is a lining of it, which is called the endometrium. So this is the lining of the uterus. And then the uterus opens into there is a circular muscle here, the ring of muscle here, which is called the cervix. And sometimes women suffer from cancer of the cervix, and then of course we have to remove the uterus. So number one, uterus. Number 2, ovaries. Number 3, oviducts, one on either side, and the cervix and the vagina. So these are the different parts, and you must be able to label them, and you must be able to identify them on maybe side views or front views like the one I've just shown you. Now, the functions of the different parts of the female reproductive system: the ovaries produces the hormones estrogen and progesterone, and it is the site where the ovum or the egg cell develops and the ovulation occurs. The fallopian tubes or the oviducts carry the ovum from the ovary to the uterus, and usually it is the place where fertilization is going to take place. Then the fimbria, which is the funnel-shaped opening of the fallopian tube, it just helps in sweeping following ovulation. Then the uterus is a pear-shaped organ in which the embryo and fetus develop and is also involved in menstruation. The cervix separates the vagina from the uterus, holds the fetus in place during pregnancy, and dilates during birth to allow the fetus to leave the uterus. It's a ring of muscle, so it has to dilate in order to allow the fetus, fetus which is going to be born, is going to pass through this canal. Then the vagina extends from the cervix to the external environment, provides a passageway for sperms and menstrual flow, and functions as the birth canal. So these are the different parts of the reproductive system, and you all need to understand it, how the functioning is going to be taking place. And I'm just going to explain that. Next point of the syllabus is comparing the male and the female gamete. Now, as we all know, the male gamete is produced is called the sperm cell and is produced in the testes, and the ovum or the egg cell is produced in the ovaries and is the female gamete. So now, as we look at it, we have to compare the size. Size, of course, the sperm is much smaller and the ovum is much bigger and is much larger. It has more cytoplasm, and of course, it has a cell membrane. Both of them have a cell membrane, but the sperm has a flagellum and it can move, while the ovum, of course, cannot move. Now, the movement swim using the tail, moved along the oviduct by cilia and peristalsis. So, the ovum itself cannot move, it's moved by the cilia and the peristalsis of the oviduct. Then the food store uses sugar in the seminal fluid, and here it uses the proteins and fats in the cytoplasm. The chromosome numbers in both are 23 because these are haploid cells and they have half the number of pairs. Like, for instance, in humans, there are 23 pairs, so in this, there will only be 23 chromosomes, one of each pair. Please, everybody, be very clear on this, one of each pair. Then the numbers produced, of course, in the male, the millions are constantly produced after puberty throughout life. But the female, only one ovum is produced a month after puberty, menopause, except when pregnant or taking the contraceptive pill. So this is what we have to understand is that, only one ovum is produced in a month in the female, while millions of sperms are produced every day. First of all, what we need to understand is what is happening inside the ovary, and as we will discuss it in the menstrual cycle, one ovum is produced by meiosis. So this is the ovum, and the ovum is produced by meiosis or reduction division. And then it is surrounded by these cells, which are called follicle cells. And where did these follicle cells come from? These follicle cells came from the ovaries. So this whole structure is going to be called the Graafian follicle. Now, during the first 13 days of the cycle, this follicle develops. So this is called the Graafian follicle. And this is the ovum which is surrounded by the follicle cells. And of course, this becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger during these 13 days. And then some of the cells liquefy and it forms a fluid-filled space. Some of the cells liquefy and form a fluid-filled space. And then it comes to the surface of the ovary and it forms a blister. Now, what is a blister? A blister is like, when you burn your hand or a chala ban jata hai. So a blister, because this fluid is going to exert pressure. So it forms a blister on the surface of the ovary. And then what happens on day 14 of the menstrual cycle, we say ovulation occurs. we say ovulation occurs. Now, what is ovulation? Ovulation is the release of the ovum. So, what you have to understand is what is ovulation. Ovulation is the release of the ovum. So, this is going to burst, and structure is going to go out. The structure which was inside. Now, this is ovulation, is the release of the ovum from the surface of the ovary, and that is called ovulation. Now, what is left behind? This left behind is this little remnants of the Graafian follicle, and I'll just color it in a different color just to make you all understand it. Now, this structure is no longer called the Graafian follicle. It is now going to be called the corpus luteum. And this corpus luteum is going to secrete progesterone. So corpus luteum, let me just spell it again because I might not have written it. So corpus luteum, Luteum. So this remains of the Graafian follicle is called the corpus luteum, and it is going to release the hormone progesterone. So please understand this. How this is going to happen? This is going to happen is first the ovum, then the follicle cells, then the follicle cells add more follicle cells, becomes a larger follicle, and is called the Graafian follicle. This comes to lie on the surface of the ovary, forms a blister on the surface of the ovary. Blister means chala, a sort of a fluid-filled sac, and then it bursts on day 14. And this ovum with the follicle cells is released. So this is the ovum and the follicle cells released into the oviduct. And what is left behind in the ovary, what is left behind inside the ovary is going to be called the corpus luteum. Let's look at the sequence of events is when the ovulation occurs. Now, ovulation occurs on day 14 of the menstrual cycle. And from the ovary, you can see I've shown you an arrow and I've shown you how this ovum is going to be released into the oviduct. Now, the sperms deposited during sexual intercourse into the vagina are going to travel all this way. They have a very long journey to take and they'll come here. And if the ovum is there, then fertilization is going to take place. If an ovum is present, the sperm is going to. So now please remember this fertilization takes place in the outer 1/3 of the oviduct. And as soon as that happens, a zygote is formed. So the sperm and the ovum, the sperm nucleus and the ovum fuse, and a zygote is formed. This zygote has no way to move. So as I said to you before and earlier in the video as well, there is ciliated epithelium inside the oviduct. So that is going to move. That is going to move this zygote towards the uterus. And the peristalsis and the ciliated action is going to move it. And it is going to come and it is going to implant here, implantation. So look at the first thing. The first thing we said was ovulation. Then we said fertilization. And then we are saying implantation. And then we are saying implantation. So ovulation, fertilization, and then implantation. And implantation means it comes and embeds in this lining of the uterus, where it is going to then start to grow. So again, I'm going to recap. Ovulation, release of the ovum from the surface of the ovary into the oviduct. Then the sperms which are deposited in the vagina travel here and fertilize in the outer 1/3 of the oviduct. A zygote is formed. The zygote starts to divide by mitosis. The zygote is a cell which divides by mitosis and forms a ball of cells. And that ball of cells is moved and it moves towards the uterus and it comes and implants in the uterus. And that is called implantation. Now another diagram showing you this in more detail as the embryo. Now first the first cell, one cell was the zygote, then it forms a ball of cells which is called the embryo. Now when the embryo implants, some of the cells of the embryo now separate out and start to form a structure which is called the placenta. And then, of course, it forms a sac around it because this is now going to develop inside it. And this sac is called the amnion or the amniotic sac. And inside this amnion is a fluid which is called the amniotic fluid. And this fetus is now going to start developing and is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, of course, we see that it has to be attached to the placenta by an umbilical cord. You see, I have now moved the number one. The first important thing you've got to understand is that I've used one colored marker. The reason is that this is all fetal genetic material. Whatever is green is all fetal genetic material. So the placenta is fetal genetic material. Fetus to hai, and the amnion and the umbilical cord. So all is fetal genetic material. It is come out from that one cell, the zygote, which developed into a ball of cells, and then some of its cells have become the placenta, some of the cells have become the umbilical cord, some of the cells will develop into different organs of the fetus. So this is the development which you need to understand. Now the placenta is just a medium of transfer. It's like the Wagah border between Pakistan and India. So it allows the transfer because on this side we have the mother's blood. So from the mother's blood, things are just going to be transferred from that to this and from here to there. So oxygen from the mother's blood is going to transfer to the fetus, but through the placenta. And similarly, glucose, oxygen is going to come from the mother's blood to the fetus for the cells of the fetus to respire and release energy and grow. Similarly, the fetal cells are respiring, they're living cells, so they are also producing carbon dioxide. So that carbon dioxide must pass into the mother's blood. And when it passes into the mother's blood, it is then going to be exhaled by the mother, by the mother's lungs. So oxygen and glucose diffuses in from the mother's blood to the placenta, and then of course it reaches through the umbilical cord, it reaches the fetus. We're going to do the details of that as well. And then the carbon dioxide produced by the fetus is going to enter the mother's blood and is going to be taken to her lungs, and she's going to exhale it out. So please understand that is placenta, fetus. Placenta is just allows the transfer. It does not produce or it does not, and it only allows the transfer of substances across it. So it's only going to allow the transfer of substances. So please understand that, and understand that the entire placenta, fetus, amnion, umbilical cord is all fetal genetic material. The functions of the amnion is to produce the amniotic fluid, and the amniotic fluid acts as a shock absorber because you see the fetus is growing inside here. We don't call it the baby as yet. So it acts as a shock absorber because the fetus roams around in it, fetus just swims in it, and of course drinks the amniotic fluid and urinates in the amniotic fluid. But please remember, the amniotic fluid has no bacteria, no microorganisms in it. It is totally microorganisms free. There cannot be, even anything cannot cross the placenta. Even if the mother is suffering from a severe bacterial infection, nothing is going to cross into the fetus because it can damage the fetus. So the amnion is the sac which encloses the amniotic fluid. The amniotic fluid acts as a shock absorber and protects the growing fetus. Now, as we look at the umbilical cord, which I have shown you a section here, this is the section of the umbilical cord. If you take a section of it, this is what you see. You see an umbilical artery and you see an umbilical vein. Now, the umbilical artery is going to carry deoxygenated blood. Remember this pulmonary artery. So, if it is carrying deoxygenated blood, it has to be from the fetus to the placenta. So, deoxygenated blood, why? Because the cells of the fetus are using up oxygen and producing carbon dioxide. So the deoxygenated of the direction of the umbilical artery will be in this direction, fetus to the placenta. But if you look at the umbilical vein, which is carrying oxygenated blood, that is of course going to be from the placenta to the fetus, not from the mother to the fetus, placenta to the fetus. Please understand that the mother's blood is on this side, it's in the uterus wall. So the deoxygenated blood of the umbilical artery is going to be from the fetus to the placenta. Please be very clear and understand this. Fetus to the placenta. Now the oxygenated blood in the umbilical vein is going to be in the other direction, because this is where the oxygen from the mother is coming into the placenta, and then it is being carried by the umbilical vein to the fetus. So the umbilical vein is going to be in this direction, and the umbilical artery is going to be in the other direction. So please everybody be very clear on this. It is like the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein, deoxygenated, oxygenated blood. Here the artery is carrying deoxygenated blood and the vein is carrying oxygenated blood. And this is what is the syllabus that you have to understand. Describe the functions of the placenta, umbilical cord in relation to exchange of dissolved nutrients, gases, and excretory products. So please understand this about the umbilical artery and the umbilical vein. Then the next topic is the special dietary needs of pregnant women. Now, there's actually not much really theoretically. We talk a lot about stuff, but the body compensates and the body covers up and takes it from the mother's tissues. More iron, we say. Why? Because the fetal red blood cells are developing, and that means more iron is needed for the hemoglobin of the fetal hemoglobin. Then more calcium and vitamin D. Why? Because we need calcium for the bones of the fetus developing, the teeth of the fetus developing. And why vitamin D? Why? Because we need it for the absorption of calcium. Then a little more protein we talk about, because you see the structures of the placenta have to develop, the structure of the uterus has to develop, the body parts of the fetus have to develop. So we say a little more proteins, because proteins would be needed for those structural proteins, enzymes, hormones, extra hormones being produced during pregnancy. And more carbohydrate. Why? A slightly more. Of course, a woman should not eat for three people, but I mean, just a little more carbohydrate. Why? Reason is because the energy is needed, because the glucose is being used also by the fetal cells for respiration and the release of energy and for growth. Let's discuss the topic of advantages of breast milk. I mean, your topic of syllabus is describe the advantage of breast milk compared with bottle milk. You know, bottle milk is you get this powder, you buy this powder, it costs a lot of money, and then you buy these bottles, and then you boil the milk, and then you add the powder to it, and then you shake it, and then you cool it, and then you give it to the baby. But you see, the advantage of breast milk is, number one, of course, it's free. Number two, it has the nutrients in the right proportions. Then it is easily digested. Then it does not contain any bacteria, because going straight from the mother's breast to the fetus. So there's no intermedium, there's no bottle, there's nothing in between. Then it's pathogen free. Pathogen free means it doesn't contain any disease causing microorganism, doesn't have any bacteria. You see, if you make a bottle and you leave it and then a fly sit on it, and then of course you're going to transfer all the bacteria on it. Somebody touches it, somebody didn't wash their hands. So bottles can transfer a lot of bacteria to the baby. Then of course it is the same temperature. In bottled milk, you have to first heat the milk, boil the water, then add the powder, then shake it, then cool it, and then give it to the baby. Or you could burn the mouth of the baby to give all that boiled water milk to the baby. So advantages of breast milk as compared to bottled milk is of course very much, and of course in Islam we also promote it, and the Prophet is also, there are hadiths on it, and how this is of course very very good, and it is very desirable even in our religion. So this will complete this video here. We will continue the rest of it, which is menstrual cycle and the sexually transmitted diseases, and we will do it in the next video. And so thank you for now.